today's Recovery Unplugged. It's a new year, and in that time period, we really want to take the time to kind of start out with a whole new set and a whole new group of topics for you. And the first one came from one of the graduates of Barbara's Place, and the question was, what is the ripple effect of addiction, and can we talk about that? And so I think that's a great topic, because often I know we hear many say that my addiction isn't bothering anybody else, it's not affecting anyone else, it's only affecting me. And unfortunately, that is not a true statement. The ripple effect affects everybody around and near to the one who is struggling with addiction. Whether it's a child, parent, or spouse, addiction alters the lives of anyone who loves that person, and maybe not even loves that person, but is in their circle of influence. The behaviors of those suffering from addiction become severe enough, family and friends then become often responsible for keeping them safe, or they are left to clean up the damage, and their life begins to, in some respects, revolve around the addict. There is a heavy burden that is placed on everyone that is dealing with addiction. And loved ones then become stressed out, overwhelmed. The level of fear grows in their heart, and they end up passing on all of these, which then have an effect in their own personal lives, which starts a whole new ripple effect to the people around them, their coworkers, their friends, church. So it doesn't really matter how healthy someone is around you. If you were the one struggling with addiction, over time, your addiction or the influence of the addiction in their life will create a ripple effect of difficulties, burdens, stresses. And so I just want to talk about a few of what they might be. I think one is very obvious. Most would even agree that this is one that happens, and that is there's a financial hardship. Job inconsistency or unemployment can cause constant financial stress. If it's a spouse that was working and is no longer working, the family is picking up or potentially living on unemployment or without any income. Or another member of the family is required to take on an extra job in order to help with that hardship. They may have a hard time keeping a job, so they might ask for money, food, shelter, or other forms of support from other family members in close relationships. And this is very common that if a family member is in addiction, that they are constantly reaching out to family members and others to help them through the difficulty and to carry some of the financial burden that they have. Homelessness, even with a good paying job, an active drug addict can cost a lot of money. And then their money gets funneled away into the addiction, and they may end up having to find themselves on the street because the addiction is taking from where a mortgage should be or rent should be. Or they were rooming with someone and that person says, you can't stay here anymore. Or maybe it's a spouse, and at some point the spouse says, I'm sorry, but you can't stay under my roof. Or a parent who sets the boundary that says, as long as you remain in your addiction, you can't be in this house. So homelessness often becomes an effect, but then that leaves those that if you have children that you end up homeless with, that is an effect on the children, or that creates the added stress of now my loved one is on the street, and what do I do with that, and how do I handle the emotion and the fears that come along with that. And homelessness then often means that a family might take you in, and then that adds another burden in that household because they have now taken on the one who is struggling with addiction along with the family and becoming overly responsible there. And their lives are turned upside down and altered around this new situation or caretaking situation. So all of that even has the next ripple effect, which could happen anyway, and that is on relationships. Addiction strains relationships, no matter which person in the family has the problem. Every member struggles alongside the addict to some extent. Living with someone in active addiction is a daily challenge for everyone in the family. Extended families can also respond in many different ways. Some step back, and because they don't want to involve themselves in the chaos, and some try to rescue, some try to help. There's people are full of opinions and directives, and often there is a whole lot of blame going around. Immediate or extended families then take on the roles to help deal with the elephant in the room. No one is being themselves anymore, and relationships are poor, unhealthy, and they all revolve around the one who is struggling with the addiction. Some of the roles that people begin to take. One is just that they live in denial. Whoever and whichever member of the family that is, it distorts the view, making it difficult to see the struggles and impact caused by the addiction. And everyone else's responses. And denial just may mean that I'm working very hard to cover up so nobody knows that it exists. And they might be working very hard to create a sense of all is well. It could also be denial that they're functioning and operating and trying to be oblivious to it, which never makes the situation go away, and it doesn't help anyone. Then there's the pleasers, the ones that become the person in the family that tries to meet everyone's need, tries to make everybody happy, tries to keep the peace, tries to, keep a sense of joy in the family. You have enablers, we all know that term. They become the responsible for keeping them and the family safe from suffering any consequences. They're the ones that go around and pick up and make sure that the consequences are not felt by the one in addiction. We all know fixers, constantly trying to make it better, keeping money in the house, keeping the image up, trying left and right to get them into recovery, calling places, trying to drop them off places. I know as the director of Barbara's Place, I get a lot of fixers calling me that are trying desperately to get their family member or their friend. And I get aunts, uncles, grandparents calling, saying, how do I get so-and-so in? And unfortunately, you can't. That person has to be the one that is ready to get the help. Then there's the heroes of the family. They take on the responsibility to keep everyone functioning. They're the ones that always come to the rescue, always, they're almost a conglomeration of all of the above, the heroes in the family. And they're the ones that the addict always knows, if my enabler doesn't come through, I know this person will, and I know this person will make it right and make it happen. There are an estimated 1.5 million children performing caretaker acts in the family that are normally done by addicts. And oftentimes the hero does become the child who basically becomes the parent in place of the parent. Or maybe the older sibling, or becomes the sibling that takes care of everyone else. They're doing this in small ways. It could be cooking, cleaning, supervising, protecting, caring for the younger, even parenting the adult or whichever the addict is. That's what happens with the heroes in the family. Lost children, they're the ones that withdraw. They create their own safe world. They disconnect from the dysfunction. Unfortunately, they end up with very poor social and attachment skills and really struggle with the ability to trust and relate to other people. All of these pieces put together mean that marriages are strained, children lack stable parents for support, and children sometimes get pawned off to other relatives and grandparents. The interesting thing is so many children are not being raised by their parent who is in addiction. They're being raised by their grandparents, and that creates a ripple effect of both on the grandparents, both on what that relationship is supposed to be like or enjoyed, to the fact that they are absent with the parent and they believe the parent has chosen the addiction over them, and the feelings of rejection and where do I belong and I'm unwanted. It's hard to believe, but an estimated 25% of American children grow up in households where substance abuse is present. And besides the roles that children may end up taking or some of the effects that they have to live under, Children who live with an addicted parent also grow up in an unpredictable and inconsistent environment. As the addiction progresses, people become erratic, frustrated, angry, and lash out at those closest to them. And unfortunately, it becomes more likely that those children will observe abuse, experience it personally, or live in fear of the possibility of it happening. And whether it's emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, the risk increases in the homes of those that are struggling with addiction. With or without abuse in the home, those children live with secrecy, role reversal, and just the inability to relate to the world in the way children were supposed to relate, free and relaxed, and to be able to enjoy childhood. And they're forced often to grow up quickly. Children in these environments, over time, studies have shown that they have underdeveloped or distorted social development. They lack self-confidence. They have poor emotional control because it's never been demonstrated to them how to regulate emotions or how to experience variety of emotions. And they struggle with problem-solving skills because they were taught that we solve problems one way or just a handful of ways, and those ways are usually not healthy and productive. Foster care rates for years, and I used to work in a system with children that were in foster care or removed from the homes for various reasons, and that program had shut down because that was becoming less and less of a problem. But in about 2012, fueled by the opioid crisis and the addiction crisis, the foster care system and children that are being placed outside of the home are on the rise as parents are losing custodial rights. This means children are now being raised by their family members, grandparents, or foster parents. And unfortunately, due to a shortage of foster care parents, children are often being moved far away from home. So any family connections they have or that may exist are becoming out of their reach. The other thing is if the addict in the family is a child, siblings are affected. Siblings of addicts are referred to as the invisible victims. Parents become so consumed by the sibling and the addiction problem, the other children end up taking the sidelines. Siblings often feel a variety of emotions like confusion, frustration, shame, resentment, and more. Some siblings take the path of refusing to follow the path their brother or sister took, so they become overachievers, unemotional, independent, and self-sufficient. All of which sounds good, but it's usually out of balance and will have a ripple effect for generations to come on their relationships and their work environment. Others, they may turn to the substance or the bad behavior, often using them as an escape to pain or withdraw, or to draw back some of their parents' attention to them. They want to be heard, they need attention, and we need to help them not be allowed to get lost, because they do. It's just sometimes easier for so many to just withdraw and become lost. What are the common behavior problems that we end up seeing and how we know that this exists? Because every day feels out of control and because trauma or abuse is often experienced in one way, shape, or form or another, because they live in a constant state of uncertainty and unsafe environment, and they have lacked the ability to trust anyone. Nobody's word is good or true. They don't know what is right, wrong. They never know what to expect from moment to moment. Issues of mental health and behavioral acting out is seen, especially in the younger years. A lot of poor school performance, ADD, ADHD, those are some of the common characteristics that are being labeled, but oftentimes it's because of the inner frustration and inability to have any internal regulation because their external world is not regulated. Immaturity emotionally, unable to express feelings or emotions, unable to express when they're disappointed, when they're angry or hurt. They have low self-confidence. They really don't believe in themselves or their life or that in life in general. They have a greater and higher risk of anxiety and depression as they grow older and even in the younger ages. Some of the anxiety is based on the fear of people finding out, the fear of losing that parent, or they've already lost that parent, or fear of losing a sibling, or whoever the addict is in their life. Hopelessness, isolation, few friends, inability to connect to the greater world. They don't fit in because their world is so different. Oftentimes it's risk of anxiety and depression because they believe they are the problem. Somewhere along the line they believe that they're responsible, and that if they behave differently or act differently or were different, that this person would not do this in the family. And they're also at a higher risk of finding security and belonging in the wrong group. Often gangs and the children that are the problem children or the struggles, they find themselves, and that's where they find their home, and that's where they end up often introduced to drugs, because in their loneliness and isolation they find the only group that can, and that group then introduces them to another way of coping and or illegal behavior, and so we have to be careful of that. Another impact of addiction on the family unit is the chance that another family member will choose substances. Children who grow up with a family member that abuses drugs are twice as likely to end up turning to substances themselves. They follow the example set for them. Scripture tells us that we're to train up in the child the way it should go. And that really is that we are to set examples. We are to teach them and set the examples through our lives. And if our lives do not teach that, and our lives teach inconsistency, they're going to follow that, sometimes only because, and the main reason is because they desperately want the love of whoever that person is, so they will begin to be like that person, hoping that that gains them acceptance. Oftentimes a child will begin using substances with a parent because they hope that that creates a bond that they felt was lacking. Substance abuse does tend to run in families. The chances of having more than one person in a family with a problem are high. This creates the pattern of addiction, and the cycle starts all over again. And for a lot of the reasons, it's because in the family where addiction occurs, there's so much instability and dysfunction that it creates the inability to do life on a more regular basis and without external coping skills of some sort. The addiction may not be the same addiction, but oftentimes it is a different one. It is considered a family problem, and for good reason. It affects the addict, their families, their friends, and anyone close to them. One of the things we do here at Keswick is that we reach out to the spouses, because we know that for anyone who is married to someone who's in addiction, there's marriage issues, there's personal issues, and there's a huge instability there, and it's very important that we look at it that way. And we'd love to be able to even do more work with the families, and there are some places out there that they do work with every member of the family, and we do that in some ways through inviting them to our conferences and our conference weeks, where the children also get to come and appreciate the support and the consistency, and where we can minister to every member of the family. But see, that brings up the faith issues. Addiction causes so much confusion in the home, and even the double standard, that it makes it difficult to see God as consistent, reliable, understanding, supportive, and caring. Our families teach us about God. Our families teach us about trust and relationships. When the family functions around the addict, God becomes lost or unreliable to the family. And it is compounded if the family claims that they have a spirituality and even covers it up and fakes the reality of the home situation. The ripple effect on children and other members of the family's decision to turn to God, or even believe that God is the answer or can see God differently, is very difficult. But I want you to know that help is available. It's imperative. And I believe that God tells us to take care of ourselves. And it's imperative that we understand that we can't control other families' addiction. But we can, if we are paying attention to it, we can help reverse or minimize the toxic stress and the damaging effects of an emotionally unstable environment. Children especially, are known to be very resilient if, and there's a big if, it doesn't just happen on their own. They have caring and supportive and a stable caregiver. So it's very important that we don't neglect taking care of our own mental health and our own emotional well-being if we are the one left standing or the caretaker in the family. Families need to seek outside help to deal with their struggles and cope with their emotions in healthy ways. Unfortunately, we all know that a little leaven leavens the whole bunch, and that's exactly what happens. And that addiction is just like yeast, and it will spread, and it becomes like mold in our houses, and it's really hard to contain it once it gets started. And so we really do have to get at it fast, and we need to take care of all of the residual ripple effects and make sure the ones in the wake are protected. God made us to be in community to support each other with biblical principles. And God reminds us that we can trust him with watching over our loved ones while depending on God to take care of us. Developing a strong relationship with God will help you if you are the caregiver or the one who has a family member in addiction, to make wise choices, balance your own emotions, and be willing to seek help and change for yourself. God has never asked us to stop caring for ourselves and neglecting ourselves to help others. God is able to teach you healthy helping. Seeking outside guidance will help families affected by addiction walk through the difficult times and maintain a healthy family dynamic. And to minimize the ripple effect. If you know an addict, if you live with one or have lived with one, get yourself some help. Get yourself some support. Take time and sit down and talk to somebody. Do an inventory of the effects and take the steps to find healing. Stop the ripple effect with you. That's very important. There are several resources out there. Alison Bottke, Bottke, has a great book called Sanity, and she covers a bunch of different people that we need to learn to have sanity with and have healthy boundaries with. Cloud and Townsend has a book about boundaries in the home, boundaries in marriage, very helpful book. Cherry Freeman, who works out of Keswick, she has a program called Love Them to Life, where it's mom support groups. Look that up on the internet, Love Them to Life. Celebrate Recovery. Most of the bigger ones it's a great place to get the support, to even get more understanding, to get with parents. Christian counseling can help you develop healthy boundaries, coping skills. Division of Children and Youth, whatever it's called in your state. School support often have groups available for children to find a place to be heard, understood, and helped with coping skills. It's preliminary and it's small, but we need to give them a place to be able to feel free to speak and to share what's ever on their heart and cry and grieve. Although the process isn't easy, it's certainly possible for both families and addicts. I mean, this is a tough job that I'm in, ministry, but it is something that the reward is great. We see families reunited and restored. We see the ripple effect pulled back and the healing beginning in every member of the family. A family member who uses their past experience to learn, grow, and change will find they're healthier after than before the addiction hit. Let God use the addiction to grow you. Let God use the addiction to draw you to him and to even change and reverse potentially years of family history. Most of all, do not give up. There is hope for all individuals and for all families. Millions walk away from addiction every year. Your family member can, you can, and your family can be healed. And it is worth the work and all of the effort. And I thank you for listening. And I pray for all of you on a daily basis. We pray for the families out there that are struggling and looking for help. I know it's hard. I know it's not easy. I know the resources are thin, especially during COVID. But I do know that God is able and present in any time that you are struggling and in trouble. Thank you. Have a great day.